When I bought my cabin in the woods, I thought I was escaping the constant surveillance of suburban life. No noisy neighbors, no homeowners association rules about mailbox height or lawn ornaments. Just peace, trees, and the freedom to live the way I wanted. Or at least, that's what I thought. The property technically fell under the outer boundary of an HOA that covered a larger lakefront community nearby, but my cabin sat far enough away that I figured they wouldn't care about me. Unfortunately, I was wrong. It turns out, the HOA had eyes everywhere, and the moment I started fixing up my cabin, they decided I needed to play by their rules. At first, the HOA's interference came in the form of letters, generic notices stuffed into my mailbox. They accused me of things that didn't even make sense: unapproved paint colors, unauthorized structural changes, and even excessive foliage. Excessive foliage at a cabin in the woods. I laughed the first time I read it, thinking it had to be a mistake. But then more letters came, each one more ridiculous than the last. Eventually, I realized these weren't simple errors. They were targeted, deliberate attempts to intimidate me into attending their meetings, paying their fees, and letting them dictate how I lived on land I rightfully owned. The situation took a bizarre turn one Saturday morning. I was chopping firewood out back when a white pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Two men stepped out, both wearing cheap reflective vests and carrying clipboards. They claimed they were property inspectors, sent by the HOA to check for violations. I knew right away something was off. Their badges looked like they'd been printed on a home printer. Their vests didn't even match, and when I asked for their credentials, one of them mumbled something about being temporary contractors. They poked around my porch, looked at my woodpile, and even tried to open my shed without permission. That's when I stopped being polite. I told them to leave immediately, and if they didn't, I'd call the sheriff. They gave me smug looks, muttered about noncompliance, and finally left. But the whole encounter left me rattled. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and thought about what had just happened. The HOA wasn't sending real inspectors. They were sending actors, trying to scare me into thinking I was breaking rules I'd never agreed to. It was intimidation, plain and simple, and I knew that if I let them get away with it, they'd be back, maybe with more people, maybe with bigger threats. So I decided to flip the script. If they wanted to play games with inspectors, then I'd call in the real ones, the county property inspectors, the health department, and anyone else who had actual authority. If the HOA wanted to fight, I'd fight with facts and official paperwork, not fake badges. The following week, I made a few phone calls. I reached out to the county's building department and explained the situation. They were more than happy to send legitimate inspectors, especially after hearing that unlicensed people were pretending to be officials. I also contacted the state licensing board, just to cover all bases, and they confirmed what I already suspected. Impersonating an inspector is a serious offense. By the time I hung up, I had appointments scheduled. Real inspectors, with real badges, were coming to my cabin to check things out. And not only would they clear me, but they'd also be keeping an eye out for whoever was running the fake operation. Before the official inspectors could even arrive, the HOA sent me another letter. This one was more aggressive than ever. It accused me of noncompliance, threatened fines, and demanded immediate access to my property for a follow-up inspection. I knew exactly what they were trying to do: create a paper trail so they could claim I was refusing to cooperate. But this time I was ready. I wrote a formal response, signed and dated, stating that I would only allow properly credentialed county or state inspectors onto my property. I even mailed copies of that letter to the county office and kept one taped to my front door, just in case the fake inspectors tried showing up again. When the real inspectors arrived, the difference was night and day. They wore proper uniforms, had laminated ID badges, and carried professional equipment. They went through my cabin carefully, checking the foundation, electrical wiring, septic tank, and general safety compliance. They even commented on how well I had maintained the place, saying it was in better condition than most cabins they inspected. When I explained that the HOA had accused me of unauthorized modifications and excessive foliage, the inspectors laughed. One of them even said, "That's not how any of this works." At the end of their visit, they handed me official paperwork stating that my property was fully compliant with all county codes. That document was about to become my weapon. Just days after the real inspection, the fake inspector showed up again. Same truck, same vests, same smug attitudes. But this time I was ready. I stepped outside with the county's signed inspection report in hand. When they started to rattle off their usual nonsense about violations, I cut them off and demanded their state-issued license numbers. They hesitated, stumbled over their words, and then tried to change the subject. That's when I told them the county inspectors had already cleared my property, and that impersonating officials was a crime punishable by fines and jail time. I even hinted that the sheriff's office had been informed, which, by the way, was true. Their bravado evaporated in seconds, and they bolted back to their truck without another word. The following week, I decided to attend an HOA meeting just to see how they'd spin things. Sure enough, Karen, the president of the HOA, was front and center, acting like nothing had happened. When I raised my hand and calmly asked why unlicensed inspectors had been sent to my property, the room went silent. Karen stammered, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that they were volunteers helping with community compliance. I pulled out my county inspection report, slapped it on the table, and said, "The real inspectors already cleared my property. So why did your volunteers try to break into my shed?" Gasps filled the room. Karen's face turned beet red, and for the first time, her grip on the crowd seemed to falter. It turned out I wasn't the only one the HOA had targeted. Several neighbors admitted that inspectors had come to their homes too, issuing bogus violations and scaring them into paying fines. With the truth out in the open, people began demanding answers. The HOA board members looked cornered, whispering among themselves while Karen tried to regain control. But the damage was done. The trust was broken, and once people saw the paperwork in my hands, the real, stamped, official paperwork, their confidence in the HOA's authority crumbled. Within weeks, complaints were filed with the state about the HOA's shady tactics. The board faced an investigation, and Karen quietly stepped down from her role as president. Rumors spread that she had been fined for her part in organizing the fake inspections. Meanwhile, the county began keeping a closer eye on the neighborhood, ensuring no unlicensed volunteers tried to pose as inspectors again. As for me, I never got another bogus letter in my mailbox. My cabin was left alone, just as it should have been from the start. Looking back, I realized how close I had come to giving in. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, I might have believed the fake inspectors, panicked, and paid whatever fees they demanded. But standing my ground, calling in the real authorities, and shining a light on the truth changed everything. It didn't just protect my cabin. It exposed an entire system of intimidation that had been running unchecked. That gave me a sense of pride far greater than the annoyance I felt when the ordeal began. I didn't just defend my driveway or my shed. I defended my right to live without harassment. Now, when I sit on my porch and watch the sun dip behind the trees, I feel a peace that no HOA letter can touch. My cabin is mine, every board, every nail, every tree that sways in the wind. The HOA tried to scare me, tried to bully me, even tried to impersonate authority to get their way. But in the end, their schemes crumbled under the weight of truth. And that's the thing about lies. They can only last as long as no one questions them. The moment you call them out, they collapse. That's what happened here. And it's why I can finally sit back, breathe easy, and enjoy the simple life I came here for. No more fake inspectors. No more intimidation. Just me, my cabin, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I won the only inspection that really mattered. The test of standing up for myself. Sometimes I think about those fake inspectors, about the way they swaggered down my driveway with clipboards and counterfeit badges, acting like they had the right to judge my life. Now, they're nothing more than a story I tell, a cautionary tale about how far people will go when they crave control. But for me, the real lesson wasn't about them. It was about resilience, about learning that when someone tries to take away your peace, you don't always need to fight louder. Sometimes you just need to fight smarter. The best part of all this is knowing it didn't just end with me. Other neighbors, the ones who had quietly endured those bogus inspections, began standing up for themselves too. They realized they weren't powerless, that the HOA wasn't untouchable. Real inspectors, real paperwork, and real courage tipped the scales. The cabin community started feeling lighter. People weren't whispering in fear anymore. Instead, they swapped stories, shared tips, and built a little network of support. That sense of unity, born from one ridiculous scheme, has lasted far longer than the HOA's scare tactics ever did. So now, every evening when I lock the cabin door and step onto the porch, I breathe in the cool air and remind myself, freedom is fragile, but it's worth protecting. No organization, no clipboard, no fake authority can take away what's yours if you're willing to defend it. And maybe that's the ultimate irony. By sending their imposters, the HOA thought they could break me. Instead, they reminded me just how strong I could be. That's why when the credits roll on this chapter of my life, the final image isn't of confrontation or paperwork or shouting in a meeting. It's of something simple. A cabin standing tall among the trees, unbothered, untouchable, and truly free. In the weeks that followed, I realized something unexpected. The fight wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much quieter, much steadier. Life at the cabin returned to its rhythms, but those rhythms felt different, almost richer. I'd wake up to birdsong echoing through the trees, the kind that reminded me why I built this place in the first place, and I'd smile because the sound wasn't interrupted by the anxiety of another knock on the door or another fake inspection. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. It carried the weight of a battle fought and won, a peace defended and secured. And each morning, when I brewed my coffee and stepped onto the porch, I looked at the road leading in, the very path those imposters once marched down, and I felt nothing but gratitude that the only footsteps I heard now belonged to deer crossing the clearing or neighbors dropping by with a wave. That contrast, the memory of intrusion and the reality of peace, made me treasure the ordinary in a way I never had before. When people ask me about what happened, they expect me to talk about the showdown. The moment the real inspectors showed up, the look on the fake ones' faces when they were exposed, the HOA's stammering excuses. And yes, that moment was sweet. But the part one carry with me every day isn't the drama, it's the lesson. I learned that lies can only live in silence, in shadows where no one dares to question them. The moment you bring in the light, the truth, the facts, the real authorities, those lies collapse under their own weight. That's not just true of HOAs and fake inspectors. It's true of life itself. Fear grows in the dark, but courage grows in the open. And when you choose to stand in the open, to face the storm with steady feet, you discover a strength you didn't know you had. That's the gift the HOA accidentally gave me. They showed me that peace isn't something you inherit. It's something you defend, one act of courage at a time. Now, when I sit on the porch at night and watch the sky shift from gold to deep blue, I don't just see a cabin and a stretch of land. I see a sanctuary. Every board, every nail, Every pine tree that leans in the wind carries a story, a reminder of why I refuse to back down. And what I love most is how ordinary it feels again. The HOA tried to make me second-guess every step, every choice, every corner of this property. They wanted me to feel like a trespasser in my own home. But by standing firm, I turned that fear on its head. Now, this place isn't just where I live, it's where I belong. The sound of crickets, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of the trees, these are my inspections now. The approval I care about isn't a fake stamp on a clipboard. It's the simple satisfaction of knowing I can breathe here without anyone hovering, without anyone pretending to hold authority over what they never built, never owned, never loved. That's what freedom feels like, and it's worth every ounce of the fight it took to reclaim it. What surprised me most in the aftermath wasn't how quickly the HOA quieted down, but how the neighbors began to stand taller. People who once whispered their frustrations started to speak more freely, and I could see the relief on their faces when they realized someone had finally proven the HOA wasn't invincible. It's funny how one act of resistance, something as simple as calling the real inspectors, can echo far beyond the moment itself. It wasn't just about exposing the fake inspectors. These days, life feels almost too quiet, but that's the beauty of it. I can stack wood without feeling watched, I can paint the cabin without snapping pictures of receipts, and I can take long walks down the gravel road without wondering if someone is tailing me in the name of inspection. It's the kind of peace you don't notice until it's gone, and once you win it back, you never take it for granted again. I've come to realize that this cabin isn't just shelter, it's a reflection of resilience. Every creak in the wood, every knot in the timber tells a story of survival, of choosing to stand firm rather than bow. And when I sit by the fire at night, letting the warmth soak into me, I think about how close I came to giving in, how tempting it was to just comply for the sake of quiet. But true quiet doesn't come from compliance with lies. It comes from standing tall in the truth. That's the peace I live with now. Not silence bought with fear, but silence earned with strength. And so, this chapter closes not with a fight, not with the sound of raised voices or the shuffle of papers, but with stillness. Picture it. The cabin in the fading light, the trees swaying, the porch lamp glowing softly against the wood. No inspectors, fake or real, walking up the path. No threats, no intimidation. Just a home, whole and unshaken. That's the image I hold on to, and that's the image I want to leave behind. Because in the end, this story was never really about the HOA, or their tricks, or even the inspectors they sent. It was about the simple truth that no one gets to decide the worth of your life but you. They tried to write my story with forged signatures and hollow threats, but I took the pen back, and as I set it down now, I do so with quiet certainty. This cabin is mine, this peace is mine, and this freedom is untouchable. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's that freedom doesn't always roar. It often whispers. It whispers in the wind weaving through the pines, in the soft creak of the porch boards under my boots, in the quiet exhale at the end of a long day when I know I've earned my peace. The HOA's games, their fake inspectors, their threats, they all loomed so large once, like storms big enough to tear down everything I had built. But storms, no matter how loud, always pass. And when they do, what matters is the strength of the foundation beneath you, the place, the values, the will you refuse to surrender. My cabin isn't perfect. The paint peels, the roof sometimes groans under heavy rain, the boards bear the scars of seasons past. But that's what makes it beautiful. It's real. It's mine. And in every imperfection I see proof that I stood firm when someone else tried to tell me I didn't belong. That's what this story has always been about. Not the HA, not the confrontation, not even the inspectors. It's about the quiet power of belonging to yourself, of claiming your space in the world, and refusing to let anyone take it away. So tonight, as the last light fades and the forest settles into its timeless hush, I know with complete certainty, this story doesn't end in anger or noise. It ends here in stillness, in strength, in peace. A peace that can't be bought, bullied, or faked. A peace that is, at last, untouchable.